Start rock, and we'll go around the table quick.
Okay, we're live.
We are live. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second meeting in July of the Mahone Bay Town Council. And it is the final meeting before the summer break. And we have a rather busy agenda that reflects the fact that we will not be meeting again until September. And we'll begin this meeting by acknowledging, as we have been doing, that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight we gather with the intent followed by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaties, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. And we would welcome the people at home who are watching us on YouTube. And we encourage their participation. And when the meeting has concluded, before we go in camera, there will be an opportunity for those of you that are still watching on YouTube can ask a question on any item that was discussed through tonight's agenda. Council may not answer your question specifically tonight, but you are welcome to ask it. Okay. With that, the meeting is called to order. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. There's a couple of minor amendments. We are adding a notice of motion in item 9 under new business, and under the closed session. One of the items will be potential litigation that we're going to discuss. CAO, what were the other two issues that you had for?
No, that's it. It's just the title is litigation or potential.
Just the one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councilor Feeney, seconded by Councilor Now. All in favor? Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the special budget meeting of July 6th.
Move to approve as circulated.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Feeney. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the regular meeting of July 12th.
Move that they are accepted as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Carver. All in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to the special budget meeting of July 14th.
Move that the minutes of July 14th special meeting be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Now. All in favor? Motion's carried. Special budget meeting on July. We did nothing in July, but that's
Special meeting, yeah.
July 22nd.
I would move to accept the minutes as circulated for July 27th special meeting.
Thank you. Seconded by the deputy mayor. On the motion, all in favor? And finally, the special budget meeting for July 25th.
Next move that they be accepted as circulated.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councilor Wilson. On the motion, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. We have two presentations tonight. One is with Gary Ramey on public transit concept for Lunenburg County. Mr. Ramey.
He hasn't joined.
He hasn't.
He's in the attendees section there, Kelly. I think you just have to upgrade him somehow. I mean, if you want to work on that in the background, imagine Adam would mind.
We
going
can
first.
have the
I
fire
thought you,
chief.
sorry, I thought you knew Gary was there. I had spotted it there, but I.
No.
Fire Chief Eakins, are you ready?
Yep, I am.
Okay, if you would, please.
Yep. So I did submit the report there. Like in the report there, it does say we had a pretty quiet quarter. We didn't really have much in the way of calls. But we did move into our new hall, which we are very grateful for. Things are moving along nicely there. We've still got a few more little things to finish off and get tidied away before we're able to host our grand opening on the 20th of August, and hopefully we'll see you all there. And then also with the council hopefully passing the budget this evening, we'll be looking forward to purchasing the new trucks. We're very grateful of the council allowing us to do that. It's definitely going to help serve the public a lot better with the new trucks, the way they'll be geared up. Yeah, that's definitely something else big for the department. So yeah, there's other than that, I haven't really got too much more to report. Other than that, so I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Councillor Carver.
I have a question about medical calls, and when does the fire department respond to a medical call compared to EHS?
So the department is only really responded to medical calls if it's a cardiac arrest or if we're requested by EHS. Sometimes if EHS aren't in the area or they've got a long wait time, we might get called. But for the most part, we're not responding to all medical calls in this area. It's just the more serious ones. We do go out for lift assists, things like that, if EHS requires some extra hands there. But that's about all we do for medical.
Great, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Chief, is there a time slot for the grand opening on the 20th?
I do believe Kelly and Richard might have discussed that today. I was unable to attend the meeting. So I might have to let them answer that.
You want to
I
answer?
can speak to it, so we'll have more information in the next couple days, like with broader strokes, and then we'll work on the details next week.
We did discuss a start time of 11, but I'm not sure. Yeah, definitely, yes, that's helpful.
That's
It'll be roughly a 2-hour.
thanks.
And there'll be an opportunity for the citizens to kind of tour the new
Yeah,
facility.
we're looking at the official opening probably won't take all that long. We're not suspending, so after that, we'll have a 2 to 3 window where people can be given tours through the,
Okay.
plus some other activities that we're planning on having.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On this 20th. Okay, anything else for the fire chief?
I'm just going to use this opportunity to mention a question that I discussed today with the CAO, which was about if and when the fire hall might be used for cooling purposes, as a cooling center rather than a warm. And we know it's going to be a warming center at some point, but could it be used as a cooling center?
Interesting point. I was speaking with the REMO director. I had been approached by a couple of citizens over the weekend who asked that question, and I was curious as to whether or not there's a temperature humidity combination that, like there are in a lot of HR policies, that would cause the fire hall to be available. But she said no, she wasn't aware of one, but that we can do it at any time. We don't need REMO involved. There's no prescribed requirement to open the hall. And it struck me at the time, CAO, is it the ECA who's over in Chester?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when we talked about having a position in here, at the time, there were very few staff in town hall, and it was deemed difficult to undertake the task. And I'm wondering now, with the new facility and the new capacities and the new additions we've made to staff, whether we could not repatriate the EAC back to Mahone Bay for Mahone Bay.
I mean, it'd be something to consider in the budget. I guess we pay a certain amount to Chester. I think it's now, it was $3,600. I think it might be more than that now. The position mostly has responsibilities to Remo. So all of the units as a tenant on participating in Remo have to contribute a certain amount of time to emergency operations and standby. So every unit has that responsibility, and most of them have done so by creating this sort of like standalone position or attaching it onto another position.
Another duty.
So what we did was we asked Chester to attach it to one of their positions. Essentially, that was years ago.
Yep.
Essentially, that's always been how we provided that responsibility to Remo. So that person has a couple of hours, it's about 4 hours a month, that they can do work specifically to Mahone Bay, or if we cede that time to them helping Angela out in some fashion in Remo. So we don't assign a lot of responsibilities to the person, but we have, particularly in this case, asked with the fire hall coming online, could they work with Angela to look at protocols around opening the building? As far as that person becoming a town staff person, it would be a matter of somebody having the time to devote to Remo and then contemplating if that's all we're after, or if we're actually after having more of an EMO service. So, if we're just talking about satisfying Remo, I wouldn't necessarily see it as being very valuable to bring it back in-house, probably the same cost. But if we have a real ambition as to time we want spent on emergency management within town, that'd be something to look at. It also would make it a little bit harder to do it as a side of desk responsibility, but it certainly could be contemplated.
Councillor
But
Curran.
in terms of the opening the fire hall for the public and when it's too hot or when it's too cold or the electricity.
How hot is too hot?
Right. So partly it's a matter of getting proper protocols in place before we can really do that. Otherwise it's, how's it?
Yeah, well, having the protocols in place would obviously help in terms of knowing when to activate, but the protocol will be more about when we have activated, how is that actually going to happen? So if we use a comfort center approach with the community room, so we say, here's the community room, it's good for dropping in, charging your phone. If you're cold at home, you're warm at home. Presumably there would be an attendant, at least one person. If we go up to the level of opening the hall, or if there's a decision to actually do an emergency shelter, there's a lot more manpower that's involved. There's the Red Cross possibly to activate through. So right now, if we were just going to open it, just the community room and just for drop in to get cool, use the bathroom facilities, charge phone, whatever you're there. We probably want to have at least one person on hand. Otherwise, we just use signage, come on in and sit down. So the main thing with the protocol is like, I don't have somebody to turn to say, would you be willing to volunteer in this capacity? I don't know if we'd be paying somebody, because we've never talked about whether that would be part of an emergency budget we could occasionally tap into to pay somebody $50 to be there for the day or something like that. So those are all the kind of things that we haven't worked out. So we could do it if we wanted to come up with a one-off, we could do that. But I don't know. I don't want to really prejudge what that would look like. So council would have to give some input on how we thought that might happen, or direct staff to come back with it. But obviously we don't have another meeting to come back to before.
No, I sort of have a sense that we can't put things in place for this summer, but could we direct staff to bring a policy or a draft policy protocol?
And that's what we're working on. And I feel like we were directed to in the past, because there's a place where I report in the report to council that this has been assigned to Brendan and that he was working on it, but I'm not sure if I can remember where that is. So I do believe it was a direction that we were given at some point.
Okay, so that we know it, we know that is the intention to have a protocol in place for opening the fire hall for the comfort of people when the power is out or when the temperature is very high.
Yeah, a variety of situations. I mean, it could be evacuation, so everything might be fine, but the people may be leaving a facility, like let's say the Quinlan or something. If it needs a sudden evacuation, the large multi-unit building, we'd have somewhere to activate that. So, yeah, because those protocols, the Remo has set like a number of kind of template, but there's a lot left to be filled in behind the scenes to make it actually practical.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on that one? All right. So that's it for the fire department. Thank you, chief.
Thank you very much, and we'll speak to you later on. Thank you.
Okay,
Cheers, Adam.
Thanks, Chief.
do we have Mr. Rainey yet?
No.
And do you know if we're on broadcasting on YouTube?
We are.
We are. Okay, thank you. I just had a note that we weren't on, so.
Mayor, would you like a motion to formally defer Mr. Ramey's presentation until the next council meeting, or would rather wait till later on in this meeting?
I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn to defer it till the next meeting.
What are you actually thinking at this point? Is he?
I'm not sure how they've entered as attendees, but there's no way for me to communicate with them. I sent an email. But I'm not.
Because you can see us and hear us, so.
Yeah,
Hi, Gary, sorry, we didn't figure this out.
and I can't message them through Zoom or anything.
Okay.
I was just wondering, rather than having changed to another time, we can go on to the agenda and when it gets back, we can do his presentation. In the course of the meeting, if he's interested in doing that.
Yeah.
Because I know schedule wise, he might be busy and.
It is on
breaking-
our hook that he's not
Yeah.
getting in.
Are you able to send an invite right now through Zoom?
I can't because the meeting started, so I can't edit anything. So it can't be resent. So if you guys can hear us, if you can try going back out and looking at the different links that you get from Zoom and making sure you're clicking on the one that says panelist link.
Yeah, we can move on to the other agenda item. If it makes it in. we can-
So,
Yeah.
whatever, okay. We will, Councilor Feeney, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, fine, Mayor. I just, no, I was just trying to be courteous to Mr. Ramey,
Yep,
his time, and didn't want him sitting around for another hour this evening thinking that he was gonna be called out at a moment's notice, so. Fair
okay,
enough.
good, thank you. We'll see what happens. Let's go down to, there's nothing under correspondence for action, but we have a number of correspondence information items. What is your wish?
We've received and file items 5.1 through 5.8.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds, but,
Yeah.
okay, on the question.
Yeah, so I think for 5.5, would be great for us to acknowledge Kara's impact in this community. I know this is her participation in the social public libraries, but she's been a huge part of this community for the time that we've been here.
Councillor Carver is having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor.
I'll try and speak louder.
Thank you.
I was talking in reference to the letter of resignation for Kara. I was saying basically, Kara has had a huge impact in the community, not just through her participation in the social public libraries, and maybe we can send a letter of acknowledgement and recognition of her impact in the community and sadness that she will be leaving us and going to better things in Norway. We wish her and her family well as she does that.
Better to home base.
Okay.
Hello. Hey.
Hello.
There he is.
Hi, sorry, we've between Gary and I, we're not going to be hired by Google anytime soon. So I'm going to turn this over quickly to Gary Ramey, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Are you interested in still hearing from us now, or do you want to move on?
I think if you're ready, we'll hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you so much, Your Worship and councillors, and I think perhaps Mr. Hyde and Ms. Redden are there as well. We're seeing some of you, but not all of you, but at least we're on, and we're very appreciative of you taking a few minutes to talk to us, and we're sorry about the glitches on the front end. Anyway, we know we have limited time, so we don't want to go on too long here about things other than what we've come to talk about. I assume you got the one pager, the very brief one pager, and the motion from Modal. And what we're very interested in doing is taking a really good look at public transit in Lunenburg County and seeing if it would be feasible to have a system that would operate within the county. And there have been several studies done on public transit in Lunenburg County, and I'm sure you're aware of it. There was one done in 2009. There was one done in 2014. There was one done in 2017. I'm not sure if it was this one. It was done by CBCL, and it was really quite professionally done. And all of them have suggested that it's a great idea. The trick, of course, in any of this is to how do you pay for it? How do you sustain it? And is it even feasible to do so? And what Greg, my friend and associate, and I are interested in doing is doing a feasibility study, not on whether or not public transit's a good idea in Lunenburg County. I think that's been shown. What we're interested in doing is conducting a feasibility study on whether or not there's some formula we could come up with that would make it affordable to the various districts. And the reason I'm so interested in this is when I was in the MLA for Lunenburg West between 2009 and 2013. And I think it was in tail end of 2010 or 2011, somewhere in there, we Pam Birdsall, who was my colleague in Lunenburg, and myself had been talking to people who were interested in public transit in Lunenburg County, and we were able to get $130,000 put up by the Nova Scotia government to run a pilot. And we were quite excited about that. And anyway, it went out to the municipal districts at the time. And what happened is they were going to be putting some cash in too. And I'm not sure how it got next. What I think happened, and I'm not positive, is that the towns were pretty good on this, but I think Modal at the time was a bit reluctant to go ahead. Anyway, it didn't happen, but it never really left my kind of vision of what might be able to be done there. And so when I met Greg a while back, he was asking me one day what was one of my disappointments, about being in politics. And one of my disappointments was that we were very close to at least having perhaps a pilot to see if this would work, and it never happened. And he said, well, you're still interested in it? And of course I am. And he was too. Greg is originally from Halifax. Well, he's originally from New Brunswick, but he's been living in Halifax for years. But he's recently built, in the process of building a property in Petite Riviere. And so he's a resident of the county as well. And he said, well, why don't we fund ourselves? Not asking for money. Why don't we fund ourselves a study to see if this could work, and then show it to the various municipal units and to see what they think, if we can come up with a good plan. And our plan essentially would be to see, initially at least, if we could come up with a scheme that would hook the three towns together, Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, and Bridgewater, with the hope that if it worked, there could be possible extensions over time. But we know if we chewed off too big a piece, that might be the beginning of a failure, and we don't want that. So we took the idea to Modal, and Modal passed the motion. Did you get a copy of the motion?
Mhm.
With the material? They just passed a motion that said that our request for going ahead and doing this, they would support the request. And then the town of Lunenburg similarly did that. And the town of, I don't have those, the reason I don't have the copies is the minutes have to be approved before they'll give me the actual physical copy. Lunenburg similarly agreed. And the last group we wanted to talk to, because we obviously want everybody to know about this, is Mahone Bay. And you were kind enough to put up with us tonight to get us on here so we could say a few things about it. So that's kind of where we are. We would be very interested if we ever could pull this off in going totally electric. We're not really interested in, if we could ever get the thing rolling. We don't want a gas or diesel buses. We don't think that's the way the world's going. And we would much prefer electric. And we already know from talking to Dylan a while back, I know that your town has been very aggressive in moving toward a very green kind of setup. And that's, I think, the way everything is eventually going to go. There'll be some people that'll, come kicking and screaming into that, I guess, but I think that's the way it's going to go. And we'd also like to, we know that Bridgewater has its own internal kind of bus system. They put it together. A lot of people, again, the naysayers would have said, no, it's probably not going to work that well. It turns out it's worked really very well. And we would want any system that we put in place to integrate into that system as well. We don't want to be messing around with other people's turf. We know that the Senior Wheels people also are very interested in serving citizens of Lunenburg County, but they're not like, they don't have like a fixed system that they're interested in. They have more of a system where you phone up, they come and get you when you need to go, sort of thing. But we were hoping that the various councils would support this concept. And I think I've chewed up my 5 minutes. I'd like you to meet my associate, Greg, and then we'll answer any questions you have if you wish.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties in the light. If I'm down here at my lot, and let me just turn that light out, and my we're building a home here. So if you think that Gary and I are calling from a trailer, you're correct. It's very fancy. So
Luxurious.
yeah, Trailer Park Boys times two. I've been an entrepreneur my professional career here in Halifax in the medical device and healthcare, and one of my previous businesses, we invented basically indoor farming or vertical farming in Canada with a company called True Leaf, which was bought by McCain's. And I currently run a medical nutrition company that we sell a beverage coast to coast. Started down here in Petite Riviere, and the beverage is called Sperry, named after Sperry Beach, which is right in front of me. Gary's been telling me about this project for some time, and I've had the opportunity to work in some nonprofit in Halifax, and particularly around the Halifax hospice. So I think the key part of this, and I really like the idea for a number of reasons. My wife and I are eager to support, positive social impact, and a model like this, I think, if you could connect it, and we're not naive to understand, the annual operating costs, and there's some work to do there, but if you can think of the benefit socioeconomically to seniors, to people with disabilities, to young people, and really one of the counselors, I believe, from Lunenburg brought up a really good point that if you had something really well thought out and executed, what a boon for tourism, that if people in Mahone Bay or vice versa could get on a bus and put their bike on a rack and go from, Bridgewater or Lunenburg. So I think there's a lot of boxes checked that this could be a nation leading model. And we're not naive of the capital costs. We're not definitely naive of the annual operating costs. I think I've worked with the federal and provincial governments quite a bit over my career, and I think I understand how the financial model would work. I think it would be tremendously beneficial to Mahone Bay. And I think the key thing for Gary and I is to figure out not whether the type of bus. I think there's logistics work that's been done that's already really well done in the CBL report. It's just to make sure that there's annual operating costs that are covered, and that if you've envisioned, ladies and gentlemen, a 5-year plan, and I think I recommend what we look at. I think this has tremendous upside. As I said, Gary and I are going to fund a feasibility study to hopefully bring back to you, ladies and gentlemen, say, look, this is how it would work. This is the annual funding mechanisms provincially, perhaps federally, and municipality. And so that's my interest. I think, you know, if you think of COVID, you know, the rural communities and particularly seniors were isolated before. I think with COVID, that it made that problem even more acute. And I think a model like this integrated with Mahone Bay and these communities would be timely and very, you know, socially impactful. And again, it had, you know, logistics wise, I'm not too concerned about that. I think whether you would have stops built in here, but I think Gary and I's job is to present to you, hopefully in the fall, a model that you can look at and go, okay, well, this is sustainable and this works for Mahone Bay. So I'll turn it back to Gary.
Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. It's such an exciting proposal. And there's been such a lot of interest in the development of a transit system for years and years, as you mentioned. And I'm curious about your relationship to the Citizens for Public Transit, whether you're working with them at all, because they were the ones who sponsored that most recent study. And just, am I right in thinking that you want to build on that study and look at how the costs might work, so that municipalities and provincial governments might be apt to buy in? And how would it work with the Senior Wheels proposal, which is going to be a dial-a-ride? Because
Well, I mean, everything you've asked there makes total sense. Yes, we have talked to, as a matter of fact, we met with Stuart Frank, Citizens for Public Transit early on. And they've done some wonderful work, and they've got some real advocates, and they've been at it for a long time. And they were the people that have, as you correctly mentioned, were the spearheads behind the CBCL proposal that's out there. And so we don't want to, I was asked, of course, to, I met with them when I was the MLA years ago, but I also have been asked to join that group. And the reason I haven't joined that group is I don't want to be on any board or join any particular group that's interested in doing this. I mean, we want to talk to everyone who has a part to play, but we don't want to be actually physically involved in any of those groups. We want to hear from them all, and we want to take the best bits from all of them and see if we can get it to work. And also, we've already talked to, we were talking to Modal about the Senior Wheels as well, because we don't want to, there again, we're not interested in trying to cut into anybody else's turf or come in a pushy sort of way and go, we think we have a really good plan here and we're going to solve this and go ahead. Well, we have no idea if we're going to do that at all. And when we were in the town of Lunenburg meeting, one of the counselors there said, well, do you realize, you know, we're kind of funded differently, like the way we do things is not all the same, the way we do things. You know, you're going to have to look at each individual municipal group and look at how they do things and see if what you're proposing makes sense in an integrated way with their systems of funding and the way they do things. You can't just, you know, come in with some kind of blanket thing and say this we think this would work and put it out as a one size fits all. So we know that we have a tremendous amount of work to do, and one of the advantages I think we have is that through Greg and some of his contacts with his company, we've got some very good financial people and other resource people that we can rely on to do bits, parts, and pieces of this and bring it back to us, so then we can refine it and put it in a way that makes sense to each of the units. And that's the part that we'd be working on very hard almost immediately once we know that each of the units are interested in having us go ahead and do this.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, folks. It's encouraging to see that there's more energy towards addressing public transit. I'll just make comments around, I think it's great that you have energy that you're putting in towards a feasibility study, But I don't need to mention this to you, Gary. The huge problem we have is political will. And I think as you do all you do, if using your skills and experience and whatever you gain through provincial office, finding a political political solution that allows the people who can back the system will be very helpful. I think as a council, we know the importance of public transit. We know it's linked to so many things, housing being a key one for me, I guess, if we had public transit around, housing will probably be a little bit more easier to sort out and be able to provide affordable housing, because you can have much more reach. Right now, that's a challenge because everybody has to drive everywhere. So that political will and coming up with a solution that sort of addresses the lack of that political will may be a good thing. So I wish you all well, and from my side, I'll be cheering you on from the side, and hopefully you can come up with a good solution.
Thank you so much.
That's a really good question. And I think, I was quite involved in the early days of trying to get the Halifax Hospice off the ground in Halifax. And there's a lot of similarities here to your question. And I think from my vantage point, having worked with the provincial government on many, many levels and the feds, I think the provincial government is the key piece for their commitment and political will to your comment for annual operating contribution. So, and I have a lot of good relationships in the government, and I think the key part is to say, well, what are you prepared to commit on an annual operating cost? And that was the same issue with the hospice, and it took a little bit of time, but once we figured out and once they understood the economic benefit, the political will was there. And I see a lot of similarities here. I think there would be no problem to understand the socioeconomic benefit, et cetera, et cetera. So Gary and I've been talking. We got to get to the folks at the provincial government. There'll be no problem. Look, the model is a nonprofit. Where Gary and I aren't looking for jobs. I think Gary and I are very interested in seeing that if this could be socially impactful. So there'll be lots of funds available in various buckets, but the key one is the provincial commitment on an annual basis.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we would expect to hear back from you in early September.
A little later than that, I think. I mean, we'd like it to be, but we were warned by the Bridgewater Council, and I think it was I took it as a good warning when we said we'd try to get back as early as possible. They said, well, don't panic too much about getting back early. Get back with a super good, comprehensive, well thought out study, and if it takes you a little bit longer, do that. And we are prepared. We don't want to come to you and go, well, we're almost there, we got most of it. I think they'll get it, and then expect you to fill in a bunch of blanks on your own by guessing. I mean, I just think that won't work. So if we have to take a little longer, we will do that. What we would do is be back to you saying this is where we are. We're going to need this much more time, and then we'll come back to you and tell you when we're finished. But we are targeting for the fall timeframe, and if September is a little too soon, it'll be maybe a little later on in the fall. But we'd like it to be certainly before Christmas, and I'm thinking October, November maybe.
Okay, that's great.
And the other thing is, if you see fit, and based on what we've done tonight, if you'd be interested in passing a motion of, I don't know, similar to the Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and the Bridgewater ones that really doesn't commit you to other than sort of saying you'll support our request, we'd really appreciate that, because when we go to provincial government or federal government, we'd like to be able to say, look, we met with these folks, they support what we're doing here. We're not just coming in cold turkey and telling you that we think these people might support this. they actually do. Here's a copy of the motions, and here's what we want to talk to you guys about. And so that would be appreciated if you see fit to do it.
Councillor Carver?
I just want to clarify the nature of support. So it's more than along the lines of moral support and deep interest in what you're able to produce, rather than any tangible support.
It's more like it's more like it's the kind of support to support the request for us to spend our own money to do this.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which I'm hoping you'll be able to do. You know?
And we can deal with this until September.
Yeah,
Yeah, somebody could give a notice of motion under new business tonight if somebody was so inclined.
Yeah.
But Gary, just so you understand, we can't, according to our own policy, can't make a motion on request of a delegation until the next meeting of council. So even if the council, and they certainly seem positive, even if there is anyone inclined to introduce that motion, we wouldn't be able to vote on it until September. So.
Understood. That's
Wait for the
fine.
formal follow-up if there will be one.
and I think that being said, this council has tangible support for transit type programs. We've been heavily involved with the Citizens for Public Transit for a number of years. And we are most interested to hear what your work may reveal by way of an opportunity. It's unfortunately, we cannot give you a motion until early September.
That's fine. We just as long as you're more than willing to think about that right now and do whatever you think is the right thing to do when the time comes. We're more than happy with it. We're just glad that you were able to see us tonight, and we're sorry that we were giving you a bit of a hard time on the front end there, but we did get in.
We wanted to make sure.
You're not the first one that we've had difficulties with our technology.
No, we wanted to make sure we did the meeting from a very fancy office space.
Yes, that's right. The opulence of the trailer in Petit.
Yeah, it's.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay,
Thank you for having us. Have a good evening
thank you.
and a good summer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sort of like a plaque.
Okay.
So we're in the middle of receiving file.
Yes, yeah, we were.
We are indeed.
And there'd be no
And
response.
we were talking about the Kara Turner letter of resignation,
Yeah.
not to council or to any of council's committees, but to the library group.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just saying, we need to acknowledge her in some way through a letter. So I'd like to move that staff write to Kara, thanking her for her time and contribution to the community and being part of the is it council representative to SSPL committee. Yeah, let me move back.
Okay,
We vote on receiving file and then do that.
Sure.
And I have another comment about the correspondence.
okay, well, so we've got this issue here, so we can proceed to the point where we would approve the receive and file.
Yeah.
But your issue would be one follow-up condition. What's yours, Councillor Carver?
Well, it's about item 5.8, the letter written by a resident that's very close to a restaurant business on Main Street.
Yep.
And with very clearly and coherently and comprehensively expressed concerns about noise, compost smell, parking, and very late hour noise and disturbance that is affecting the quality of life in the home. And it just strikes me as problematic that this letter appears in the information section of our, and not in an action section of our agenda. And as I understand it, because there is no bylaw violation taking place, there's not much we can do. So I just find that difficult as a member of council.
CAO, did you want to comment?
Yeah, well, I guess on both the fact that it appears under for information and then the idea that there would be, no action or no violation taking place. I wouldn't mean to suggest there is no violation taking place or that no action would be forthcoming from the town on this request. Obviously, our bylaw enforcement is going to look into all of the issues that are being raised. But the letter being put on the agenda for council isn't to have council direct staff to do our pre-existing job with respect to the existing bylaws. Staff are already empowered to do that, and they've been in contact with these individuals, certainly with the restaurant and back and forth. So this is more to show council that, these issues that are being raised, many of them will not extend to the level of a violation. And despite staff's empowerment to act on violations, things are obviously, even within the limits of what is acceptable, creating an environment these individuals wanted to express how unacceptable to them the overall picture is. So, council can always contemplate new bylaws, changes to existing bylaws, but there's no specific ask for that. So that's where it ends up, where it is, because certainly the intention was to make sure council was aware that even with ongoing enforcement activities, the situation is, is not satisfactory to these individual property owners.
Okay, did you want to comment, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, just, I think, this is a good lesson, I think, overall for us when we'll be looking at the Plan Mahombe process and the bylaw revisions that we're doing, in terms of mixed, when you have mixed activities in a residential zone, the challenges that you might not be able to envision. Because I remember when the request to approve Betty's improvements came to the table, we were supporting this council because we saw it as an improvement, but we could not foresee the nuance of the lateness and things like that, and how those impacts might come into play. And so maybe just for us as council, just to note that these are some of the things we really need to think about critically when we look at that map about zoning and what's a residential zone, what's a commercial zone, and the nuances about a development agreement and things like that. How do we ensure that these things don't happen down the road? I think that process.
If you can, in fact, ensure that they don't happen.
And I think that there will be nuances as to maybe the things we can do to ensure that we don't get into this situation. I have my ideas, but I think that's in the plan. In the plan process, I think we need to contemplate what's actually happening here. The other piece is that I think just appealing, hopefully both parties are watching council right now, appealing to a sense of neighborliness to sort of get to a place where it doesn't need a third party to come and get involved. There's some things that have been mentioned in this letter that I think can be resolved between neighbors that can make sure that both the business can be successful and the neighbors who are being impacted can live a peaceful life. So
Hold that thought. Okay. Councillor Carver, you had raised the question. Are you?
Yeah, it wasn't even a question. It was just, it was a comment, and I appreciate the deputy mayor's comments, which take us forward with the avenue of the plan review.
Very good. I think
Councillor Feeney.
in some of the email correspondence, this strikes me as an issue about a misalignment of the expectations around hours of operation. And opening up a restaurant, which you think as a neighbor, especially in that area, you'd have hours of operation that would align with other similar businesses in the community. Generally, your hours of operations, with the exception of like the Mug and Anchor, which kind of has different licensing agreements, is 9 or 9:30. There might be a few people milling around, but you wouldn't expect you'd be fully up and running with full services available deep into the night. And I think with the video that was attached to the letter indicated was that like the operation was still at full swing, approach at 10:30 at night. And so I think to the deputy mayor's point, a business model that starts off in one place evolves with the market to a different place. But what we don't have the opportunity to do easily is to, change the rules of the road after the business model changes. So, as I said, there's a difference between a restaurant that serves wine and on a seasonal basis has outdoor seating versus a wine bar that occasionally sells pizza. And I do think those are parallel, those are different businesses. And so I think there was an expectation of one thing and it may be evolving into something else. So what I'd say is that, based on the CAO's commentary, I take it that there's not a lot of things the council can do other than through moral suasion and influence. But there occasionally are things the council can do. And I would say that it's a reasonable expectation that reasonable people around the council table and reasonable business owners and reasonable homeowners can find an accord down the road. Because I think if this issue continues, and I think we could revisit it down the road and see what options council can do to influence a solution. I think council will be open-minded, at least from my vantage point, to exploring opportunities to help. There's no obvious answers tonight, but that doesn't mean we couldn't find an obvious answer in the fall before the season ends. Anyway.
And perhaps an 8x10 glossy of the person who embodies the reasonableness of which you speak.
Right.
Councillor Feeney. Councillor now.
When the bylaw enforcer is looking at whether there is a violation like that, I would think he would do it anyway, but I'm wondering about the liquor license. What does their liquor license say? I mean, usually they have an end of time of closing and the time of last call on the liquor license. So, would they be in violation of that? We wouldn't know, but there's something maybe the bylaw enforcement could look at. As to what they
We
want to
expect
do.
our bylaw enforcement officer to,
We really wouldn't. What we would tell a complainant if they're concerned is that, they could talk to the province as far as that
Go to
goes.
the
but-
license board and
Yeah.
get their inspector come out.
wouldn't be our hardship, quote unquote. Okay. All right,
Just,
Dr. Muir?
final, I guess it's a question. With the other establishment that's close to that one, we have I think in the DA, we have a time.
Hours of
Hours
operation.
of operation, and I was wondering with this particular one, how come we did not have that in place? Whether it's an oversight on our part.
So we granted parking variance for this property, but I don't
But
think
not, yeah.
Betty's isn't
Yeah.
operating under DA. It's always been.
There's no
Exactly, yeah.
So that's why, and we wouldn't even have permission, like there's nothing that gives us the ability to impose hours on a business other than if they require it to go.
But I guess to your point, Dylan, there's an expectation that the business is going to kind of follow with a similar pattern of behavior to other similar businesses throughout the region. And we're just not used to seeing a restaurant open beyond, 9 or 9:30 at night.
To be as successful as this one.
Yeah, so that's new, that's new information, that if the intent is to be open for business and continuing to serve the public, and there's no question in my mind, there's a demand. But if the expectation is that hours of operation are now going to extend beyond what we normally would have expected, then that's something I think that council would want to contemplate down the road. I mean, we had this conversation with regard to the variance requested by the Salt Box last summer. There was unanimous opinion by council that the community would not support ongoing services and selling of alcohol till 1 o'clock in the morning in the residential area. There was crystal clear unanimous support that wasn't a good idea. Although, by request, variances would be provided if requested for special days or special event, council was completely open-minded to leave that with the CAO, reasonable people, Bobby Burns Day, remember, St. Patrick's Day, so feel free to come forth with any request for a special event that you want. It's the owner's birthday, whatever. We're not Puritans here, but I think if the expectation that restaurants are going to be able to be open until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night in town, that would be a conversation we should have possibly, because I do think the community it would negatively impact the community. Anyway, those are just a few thoughts.
Councilor No?
One other thing that just dawned on me that was mentioned in the letters regarding this was smoke from the wood burning pizza oven. Now, when we had the problem up on the other end of town, Spruce Street,
Yeah,
with the smoke and that, there was something brought into town, I'm not sure what it was, but they had to have the smoke stack. Certainly,
Yeah,
is that not something in this case that would come into effect?
No, it's certainly in the complaint, so obviously staff would look into that. I don't think that the definition of a furnace and an oven is the same. So I don't know, like I'm imagining that is a difference, but I'm not really the one to
I'd say I'm
ask.
not sure.
I know that the right staff have been looking into
I'm
this.
just wasn't sure how the wording is in the part that was put into effect up the other way.
Yeah, I think
I'm
the
not sure
question
what
would be,
it is.
would the same thing apply in
Yeah.
both cases? But yeah, certainly it would be assessed by staff to determine if there were rules that were being violated with respect to the height. If I just have a hand up as well, can I go after Richard?
sure.
Just to Councillor Feeney's point about, if there's a sense in the community, restaurants have never been open past a certain point, there's never been liquor service. It's quiet, I grew up in Mahone Bay, so the sense that the town rolls up a certain time is, pretty well understood. And if that is the community's sense of what is appropriate, there are, and I hate to say this because I know Mo will not want to hear this on coming back, but like we've talked a lot of times about a noise bylaw. The challenge is it's quite costly, enforcement is quite costly. If the town continues to hear complaints that amount to noise after hours, a noise bylaw is independent of one business or one location. It's a fair and objective way to impose that type of controls, and it is within the council's power to do so. We just, I think what we always remind council in that case is that we currently have a part-time bylaw enforcement officer. We certainly don't have standby bylaw enforcement after hours, which is the only time when generally noise bylaw is going to come in. So, if down the road, council wishes to contemplate the notion that we have community standards around noise, I think that is really the way to do it as opposed to through land use.
I think, Mayor, just the final thought on this is that there was considerable discussion with regard to the salt boxes, DA, and the various variances that occurred over time around hours of operations on outdoors versus hours of operation indoors. And if you recall, there was a lot of use around the patios, the expansion of the patios, and so on and so forth. But the general consideration, and I can't recall the exact terms, was that like when the clock struck 10, you had to bring the business indoors.
Close the
You
doors.
could stay open and based on whatever the liquor laws allow, but you just couldn't avail yourself of the outdoor entertainment and outdoor revelry. That was, I think, the issue there, and that to me is isn't a bad standard. So, you feel for, hey, who doesn't want to be outdoors in the middle of August at 9 or 10 o'clock at night? It's just, I think even in the salt box, they would be the first ones to raise their hands and say, we're basically our hours of operation end at this moment in time. That doesn't mean we're not still serving draft later.
Okay,
But anyway,
so are we content at this point to leave this issue in the hands of the staff who are investigating? And if as a result of that, the recommendation back to council is that we need to do this in order to be able to do something about that, then we would do that.
Yeah, I guess just a question for the CAO. Will you want any direction to sort of ask you to bring back sort of either a report or just something to let us know how things are going with this particular piece, or is it something that you can update us on?
Yeah, we usually, you know, this does include personal information. We usually don't report publicly on file enforcement matters, so.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't hurt that I don't know the current status of a lot of this, because we really wouldn't normally report in open council anyway. Councilors are, you know, reasonably desiring to be updated. I'll certainly let Maureen know that. You know, I don't think we would, even if directed, I think a public report would have to be so circumspect as to not be particularly useful. And even in private, she'll only be able to say what she can say,
Yes.
but I'll make a note to keep the council as updated as we can.
Okay, because I think council wants to be aware of what came about as a result of this complaint from the citizen.
May I ask one more question?
Yes, you may.
And I thank everybody.
Just one more,
For the conversation, it's been really helpful. I'm very curious about the difference between the salt box and the kitchen. In terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Am I right in understanding that the only reason that the salt box has those limitations on hours and noise and the opening of the door and so on is because they asked for the development agreement when they expanded their outdoor use, when they developed the patio? If they hadn't asked for that development agreement, could they have been making noise until whenever?
The short answer, I guess, is yes, you know, as to whether they asked for, why they had to get, or why they felt it was necessary to have the agreement. I don't have that information in front of me, but if you're just a commercial establishment operating in a commercial zone, then there isn't a restriction on hours of operation under the land use bylaw.
So the request for the development agreement gave council the opportunity to set those
Those
changes.
changes.
Thank you.
And the notion would be that if, you know, if you're doing something outside of the zone where the neighboring properties would have cause to expect it or not expect it, that's where development agreements are typically required, and therefore that's when the council would have that discretion.
And if I'm not mistaken, Saltbox is light industrial, it's not.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I don't, you know, I don't know what they had to get the development agreement for.
Yeah.
Whether the property was, because it had been a gas station previously
Mhm.
versus becoming an establishment, or whether it was the other, you know, way around, where in order to add the brewing activities to, you know, I don't know that, but to have all of it in one place, obviously they did have to have the A application.
Okay. So we still have the motion on the floor to receive and file. And when we deal with that, then the deputy mayor's got his issue around the note to Ms. Turner. Okay, all in favor of the motion to receive and file? Thank you, deputy mayor.
Yeah, so I'd like to move that council direct staff to write to Ms. Cara Turner, thanking her for her contribution to the community. For sure.
And she was our representative on the social library.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Do we have seconder, Councillor now? Okay. On the question, Councillor Carver? Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
But I do have a question. Do
Okay.
we need to make a motion to reappoint somebody for the library? Or does that just
I
happen?
don't think we have any candidates.
So I guess, yeah, this would kind of be a tactical issue, because I think we would automatically be moving to, we would automatically be recruiting for, I think her term would have ended, the end of this calendar year. So whether we go out now,
Okay,
just had this conversation with respect to another committee, and Mo said that technically we have to then end the appointment and do a new appointment anyway, and it seemed like that might have been complex. So her recommendation with respect to the other committee that we were talking about was to leave it vacant and advertise as normal and just appoint somebody effective January 1.
thank
I
you.
assume that would be the case here.
Okay, thank you.
Will we need to communicate that to the board? So they know that's the plan rather than.
Yeah, we'll, no, I don't think we have to do that formally, but I'll make another note to do that.
Okay. So, staff reports to council. End of the month. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, just had two quick questions. Item 28 around the note about the town speed limit. Moving potentially to 40 kilometers. Is that something, so we're gonna send the note and then we're just gonna wait patiently for a response, how they're giving us permission to do that, or providing us more instructions of what we need to do to get permission to do that? Is that about, do you think that's something that do you think it's reasonable to expect we'll get an answer back from the province before the end of the calendar year?
I think it's reasonable to expect them to get an answer back.
Don't know whether the answer will
Yeah,
be.
I don't know what really have too much expectation that the answer will be accepting our request, but you know,
Okay,
we're following what Minister Maslin said was the protocol in this
Okay.
case, and you know, so yeah, I think we'll have an answer back.
fair enough. And the second question was around item 57 and just making sure we're on the same page based on the motion made at the last council meeting about extending what I thought was extending the sunset provision within the development agreement for 950 Main Street, the one who made the property. So the way it's noted in that line item basically says that we're choosing to do nothing. And my takeaway, my recollection of the last meeting wasn't that we were going to do nothing, was that we were not doing nothing. We were doing something, and what we were doing was we were providing direction that we would extend the DA by 18 months. Which was and all of the conversation and all the commentary was that we didn't want to do nothing because we thought if we did nothing, it could just inevitably roll for months and decades. So just want to make sure we're all crystal clear with exactly what we're doing with regard to the extension of that 18-month term, which I would have thought was July 12th or July 14th for 18 months. Was
CAO?
So yeah, I think your recollection is a little bit confused because essentially what we revised by the planners is we didn't have the discretion to extend the agreement. What we had the discretion to do or not do was to enforce the end of the time period. So essentially, we may, as of last January, we may take action to revoke the DA that's been put in place. So we actually only bound our own hands, the town council only said, we can resolve that we will not exercise this ability that we have for 18 months. But we couldn't actually resolve to extend the agreement.
Well,
So it's still 18 months from July, but a future council possessed of new information could potentially rescind this motion.
so that's a marked difference from what I thought we were voting on last week. Because I didn't agree the council can do nothing. We could have just revoked a DA last meeting. Or we could have just made a motion to have it revoked in January of 2021. I mean, we had all those options in front of us had we wanted to do that, had we wanted to create a new DA with a new sunset clause. So I think we're in the same place. I think that it's, style of substance here, but I just want to make absolutely crystal clear that I don't want to set a precedent. The council just is choosing not to revoke DAs when the sunsets expire. Like that's not the message to the owner of the property, and that shouldn't be the message to any new owner or any new development agreement that gets established. Like when we set the sunset clause, it says the DA ends on a date, and it's going to end. So if part of that requires council to have a motion to end it, then I think we'll have to make sure that happens in the future.
Councilor Wilson.
Thank you. I think, and this is semantics, and I hate arguing semantics, but I think if you look at what the DA actually says, it says may revoke.
No, I agree wholly that says what it says.
And that's really the CAO's point.
That's
We
reason.
may revoke or we may not, but what we can't do is extend it. So it doesn't say that. So we can leave it alone and let it float. And at any time from the 18 months on, we can revoke at any meeting.
Mhm.
It's that,
But I
you
think,
can't extend it.
I think based on, my observations with other social media posts this week, that the message, I think, has to be, the message has to be crystal clear that the clock has already started, independent of any other decision the town makes on that file.
Mhm.
So the 18-month started 2 weeks ago. It's going to continue to tick along
For 17
for
months.
17 and a half more months.
Yeah.
And that clock will end and strike, the pumpkin, the coach will turn back into a pumpkin. And so decisions need to be made independent of the town making a commitment at the moment about running a $500,000 sewage and water line out there and putting in sidewalks and curb.
Mhm.
So if there's an expectation that no decisions are going to be made until that work is decided upon, I mean, I have my doubts whether all of that will happen before. So I do believe that I do believe that a phone call should be made just to make sure everyone understands. I'm very supportive of the project. I hope it goes forward. I wish the folks all the luck. I
Mhm.
think it's great that we're extending it. We made the right decision last week, but I do think that like Tempest Fugit, it really does
They
matter.
understand.
I just hope that's my expectation, because as you know, I'm a big believer in the open shoreline protection zone. I think it's incredibly important and makes our town very unique. I do believe, so I completely recognize the fact that property has grandfathered rights and privileges, but they won't go on forever, because our shoreline protection zone, policies can change too. So I'm just saying, like, go forth and make it happen. I just don't think that line item really illustrates that well. Anyway, thank you, Mayor.
CAO, do you want to comment?
Well, I mean, the report to council is occasionally paraphrases, but the motion really had to be crafted the way that it was. We have sent a letter to the applicant here.
Mhm.
So the text in this document that we're looking at is not
Mhm.
what they received.
Preserved, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they received an explanation that the DA may be discharged, and the council has resolved not to discharge it for 18 months from the date of that resolution. I think they're quite clear on what that
Okay, fair.
consists of, yeah.
Fair
Okay.
enough.
And we can look back at the word in here to, make sure that doesn't give rise to any social media misinterpretation as far as
I just don't
for
want.
anyone who's digging as far as to read our report to council, which is itself unlikely, I suppose, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Just to touch on that item 28 around speed limits and the fact that since we second year on council, and this has been an item that we've contemplated, thought about, I think council we're in agreement that we want to lower the speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour, but the province is not enabling us to do that. We're sort of wondering whether council would be interested in going rogue and saying, let's just do it. We have a traffic authority who can put signs up, and we get it going and see what the province reacts.
Well, since we haven't sent the request, maybe we just wait, because this says it's just ready to go.
Yeah.
So maybe we send it and see if they give us a response within a period of time. But to your suggestion, Lockport did that, and the province never stopped them, and the signs are still there, so it has been done.
So maybe just suggesting that we give the province and the local office some time limit, and maybe late fall, make a call and go ahead and do it. And sometimes I guess at levels of government have to be pushed to make decisions that are, I think we're doing this for the benefit of everyone and for the safety of our citizens. They probably don't see the urgency on their side, but I think on our side, it's something that's critical. So at some point, I would be happy to go and say, let's go rogue a little bit and do that and see what the province does.
Let's get the answer back from the province
Exactly.
and then
Yeah.
ask council to
Yeah.
consider that.
I was just planting the seed.
Yeah, okay. Councilor Kerr.
Well, I'd love to help that seed grows. I've been driving at 40 and it really is fine. It's just fine. But what is terrifying is when big, huge vehicles come along Main Street halfway into the opposing lane at god awful speeds. I mean, that is terrifying. So
And somebody's crossing the street.
and somebody's crossing the street too, but it's the idea of 40 is, yes, so that's, I think. Pine Road is good.
On the other side of this big coin on that though, I'm not sure that reducing it to 40 is going to solve our problem. Because if somebody's breaking the 50-kilometer-an-hour speed zone, they gotta break the 41.
And it's gonna police the 40.
And, you know, who's gonna police it? If we don't police it, then it's, you know, we're killing it completely. We have to get something to police it.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I just thought to make a comment about the item on water utility. I was happy to see that we are almost 50-50 now in terms of the losses versus what we sell versus 2-to-1 losses to solar.
Yeah.
3 to 4 months ago. So it's nice to see we're making some progress in that area. And I hope that the people up at the water plant hear that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Curious what's led to that. If the CEO has an idea, so.
Moved.
So I mean, these details are just being reported. Sometimes they represent change that we know what's causing and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
In terms of actual work that we've done this season, it's really just been the line to the treatment facility. So it's quite possible that our outgoing operator's theory that there were some leaks there could be being borne out by this, although even that, yeah, we'll have to, it's weird to be digging for what the improvement is in this case, but.
Look at a gift horse in the.
Yeah. I know there's been some changes in, because we've had water quality issues reported in Lower Main Street. Scott has done some experimentation with opening and shutting valves that would cause the water to either flow directly down one street or divert up and around. We don't really realize how often, you know, the water all gets where it's going, but it takes a different route to get there. But yeah, we haven't actually addressed any private property leaks this spring. There is one that we've advised the property owner that they need to address, but I don't believe it's been done yet.
Okay,
But I appreciate if we get any progress. They're certainly working towards it. So.
anything else for CAO? Okay. Entertain a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? Thank you. Let's go to the report of the clerk from the amended cemetery bylaw.
Okay. A public hearing was held on July 28th, 2022 to receive verbal and written submissions regarding the town of Mahone Bay draft amended cemetery bylaw. One member of the public was in attendance via the town's YouTube channel. No members of the public presented comments to the hearing. No submissions were received prior to the hearing. No submissions were received at the hearing. The hearing adjourned at 6:50 p.m.
Thank you. Council? Are
There's a
we,
motion in there, Mayor, just 1 second.
I think there is.
Secure second reading to the cemetery bylaw. I don't.
Make that motion.
So
Mayor.
moved.
Yes.
He's in charge of the cemetery. Seconded by Councillor Carver.
Do we have to mention the tiny little amendment that we made to the spelling of a word?
No, I'm just gonna consider it a typo. I made a note, plant to planting, not a substantive.
With that,
With that.
all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the public engagement plan for the town logo process, as it has been amended.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So introducing once again, public engagement plan. And I think, you know, you may get to the point where you say, oh, we've seen this 3 times, it's frustrating, but I think it's actually great because the whole idea with our public engagement policy is that staff will present something and then council will workshop it and we'll eventually end up with something that works. So I'm hoping we're there now. We'll see if we're there now. There was a couple comments received by email, but I'm happy to take any questions or suggestions this time.
Councillor Gerber.
I would like to suggest that the first introductory paragraph be amended so that it refers to the development of a community logo for use by the town of Mahone Bay and other parties as licensed by the town. And the reason to do that is just to further clarify what is meant by a community logo.
As licensed by the town.
For use by the town of Mahone Bay and other parties as licensed by the town.
Does that not set us up for people to ask to use the logo? And as it becomes more and more widely used by more and more groups, it becomes less identifiable as a logo for the town.
It's a community logo.
Yeah.
And council will have to adopt the policy around how we would license the use of it, because obviously you wouldn't want that to be unrestricted.
Hmm.
But the good news is we've got months to figure out the policy about the logo process is going on.
Okay,
So can that be changed without a motion or?
The motion would either be to accept the draft plan as amended.
Amended.
An amendment, or if somebody, wants to not make that amendment, they can make the motion without that. But there may be other amendments that people want to talk about, so before we get a motion, we probably make sure that they're.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that we accept the draft community logo engagement plan and add that the content that be referred to the development of a community logo for use by the town of Mahone Bay and other parties as licensed by the town.
okay, seconded. Okay, moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Opposed? Just me. Okay. Hmm. Okay, is there anything else?
There's
to
a
that?
subordinate clause to that, I guess, community logo development steering team terms of reference.
Oh, yes.
When we were directed to bring back that revised plan, we were also directed to bring back a terms of reference, so we got to the point of approving the revised plan, but this is your first time looking at the terms of reference, so there may be suggestions or requests, either you to accept it or accept it as amended tonight if there are specific suggestions, or ask staff to again come back if there's some bigger changes that you want made, and I can make some notes, any questions.
Anybody?
It's obviously taken from the engagement plan document, but it's slightly different.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so the question I have, I'm comfortable with all the items that are in there. Will we be comfortable with I guess, bullet that talks about the steering committee can propose amendments to the terms of reference?
It's not really a question for me.
Yeah, true.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor,
Propose to council.
can you make that point again?
Whether we'll be comfortable with an addition that the steering committee can propose an amendment to the terms of reference if they feel that there's stuff, because this is something we're developing. They might feel that it's very restrictive for them.
And if it's, if it was going to be added, it would be added under tasks for steering teams, where it says establish expectations for committee procedures, including, we could add a clause there, review terms of reference and should there be any changes to council.
Would the steering committee be able to make that change, or would they just make a recommendation back to council to make the change? The line.
Recommendation.
Yeah, I think you
Recommend,
have-
okay,
you
yeah.
have to.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds completely reasonable.
Yep. Okay, so,
So this would be another case that you could do, accept these as amended.
Yeah.
If that's the only change.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we, council accepts the terms of reference as amended.
as amended, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Feeney. On the question? Councillor Carver, are you waiting or?
Oh, sorry, I thought we were voting.
No, okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Sorry, I was puzzled there because I was wondering, how are those members, community members gonna be appointed?
We're going to do what we always do, take in, do scoring and review them and.
Well, you're right, this doesn't
The best.
prescribe anything outside of the committee's policy. The committee's policy doesn't necessarily apply to a steering team, so there is discretion here whether where the council would need to apply the exact methodology for committee member appointment as per the committee's policy. I guess to Joe's point, maybe probably, but it isn't technically required.
I would hope not, because it's such a draconian process.
It has challenges.
As it currently stands, and it doesn't sort of fit somehow the nature of this committee.
Like, I guess because it isn't defined in terms of reference and it isn't technically under the committee's policy, then Maureen will come back to you with a list of people. And at that time, council, I suppose, can determine how to make the appointment, since it's not prescribed here, how that would happen.
Okay,
Mhm.
All right, well, it has been,
we've got the terms of reference,
Mhm.
and that obviously is a development that is yet to happen.
There was an interesting process that took place for the selection of the search committee. Do you remember that way back in 2008? It was very organic. Different people were asked to nominate and cross-nominate people. It was, does anybody else remember that? Different organizations and different groups. were
Which
asked.
search committee was that, Councillor Darrell?
Oh, the one that came up with that worked on the ICIP. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. No?
Been around a long time.
Well-
Most of our terms.
Speaking of a long time ago, time's gone by.
Mhm.
Let's look at the next item on our list. Is that hate symbols, I think? Yes, prohibition of the sale of hate symbols.
thank you, Mr.
CEO?
Mayor. It's kind of a theme because we're coming up on August break here, and we wanted to bring some of these reports the council's been waiting for. So staff were specifically directed in this case to provide a recommendation concerning the creation of bylaw prohibiting the sale of hate symbols in town of Mahone Bay. So you'll see that the actual recommendation here is to accept this report for information. That doesn't really sound like the recommendation that was requested, but if you read into the analysis, the recommendation here is not to proceed with the bylaw. And because you wouldn't resolve not to pursue with the bylaw, the recommendation would be to accept the report for information. The reasons we're recommending not to proceed are laid out there, and there's a few links to experiences in other communities. But primarily the issue is enforceability, which we'd always contemplated was going to be the issue. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. I may or may not be able to answer them on the spot. I didn't write this, but I'll do my best. And there, as I say, the recommendation is to accept for information.
Questions?
I would make that motion.
Make your motion to accept the report for information. Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next thing on our agenda. The income tax rebate policy.
So again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is previously introduced at the, well, I guess we'll go back one step, at the June 14th meeting of council, when we were just approaching the budget process. Council directed staff to investigate a new approach to low-income tax subsidy. And then as we went through the budget process, that was presented on July 14th. This staff report was originally presented on July 14th with a revised draft and some rationale. The financial implications were discussed through the budget process and incorporated into the draft budget. So the recommendation here, despite being presented on the 14th, had to wait according to the town policy to a subsequent meeting. So we put it on the agenda for tonight, which would be the council council adopt the draft amended low income property tax rebate policy as presented. And I guess for the viewing public, the intention here has been to increase the thresholds and rebate amounts in our low-income rebate program to take into account higher tax burden on some properties as a result of rising assessments. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I thought this policy update was really well done. We had a solid conversation about it at the policy and planning meeting. We asked staff to take away and do the financial analysis on the implications of the change. We benchmarked around other communities on the South Shore, specifically Lunenburg. We're making the change, or I guess the budget documents are embedding the expectation that this is going to be approved this evening. And I think it's a good policy change. So I would move that council adopted the draft amended low-income property tax rebate policy as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. Deputy Mayor, you had a comment.
Just a curiosity around, so, and maybe I'm naive on this issue. So what happens to people who are on paper meet this threshold income-wise, but they have lots of property and resources that are not liquid?
I mean, I guess the short answer to that is this policy puts it in the hands of the CRA to make that determination, because the way that you qualify, if somebody's interested to qualify for this, is via your total income as confirmed on your prior year's tax notice of assessment. So I mean, if your income tax notice of assessment line is above or below qualifying, that's where it stops. In some cases, that's going to take into account other forms of income, but in other cases, it's not going to take into account assets that people may have, and we simply wouldn't have the ability to do an audit on an applicant to confirm that. So there's a bit of an honor system involved. Hopefully, anybody watching will take that into account. You know, if you don't feel like you actually need this assistance on your property tax, then you're probably not the person this is intended for. Because it's the simplest way to say it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. We have the motion on the table. You've heard the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the staff report on the volunteer recognition event.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So
I'm glad you showed up tonight.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of these. So this is another one where council had directed staff looking at the possibility of a recognition event for volunteers. Obviously, every year we nominate our representative volunteers for the provincial recognition event, which happens in Halifax. And there are lots of volunteers that, of course, are working in our community, and their efforts are very valued. So council was wondering about the possibility of a local event. We figured the place to start would be talking to prior representative volunteers, as those are the ones that we would theoretically be holding this event to honor, or at least that is the norm in other communities that have done this, and many of them have discontinued these over the years. And the reason is, as we found, most of the time those volunteers are busy and they don't necessarily want that type of recognition, but they appreciate being recognized. And so we do have a recommendation here. It's kind of a different form of recognition, but the recommendation was the council direct staff to purchase a gift for the 2020-22 Town of Mahone Bay representative volunteer, as well as the card to be signed by the mayor, and that this becomes standard practice in future years. So, we in addition to notifying the person that they've been nominated and that they were invited to the Halifax reception, they would be provided with a small gift and card in recognition from the town. So that's our recommendation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Councillor Kerr.
I like the idea of the card, but not necessarily the gift. I would rather see a donation has been made in your name to something, a local, the pool society. I don't something like that. And partly, I don't think it would be the choice of a gift, what to give, what's the gift going to be? Is it going to be the same every year? Does staff have to go out into the store and think, oh, what will I get? It's fiddly.
I just assumed it was a Visa gift card.
And I don't need gifts, so I'm just maybe guessing that other people don't either.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
So I mean, I get where Councilor Cow is coming from, but I think this for me is a very simple way to go and just simplify the process and stuff. If we do this, so I would be in support. I put my hand up because I wanted to move that, but.
Councilor now.
I just, when this came forward and I was part of it, I thought that we would just put on some kind of an event where we would host a get together or something like that to recognize all volunteers in the community, not just the representative volunteers. That we, any volunteer in the community would be able to come and we'd have a little social event, maybe a little finger foods or whatever and that type of thing. And, we just give them some sort of a certificate of saying, or just the mayor to get up and say thank you to all of them and have a little social thing for all the volunteers in the community, not just the representative.
CAO.
So yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that the event would only be for that person, because obviously that'd be a very small event. We have this title of representative volunteers, so we figured they were representative of other volunteers. So one of the ways to gauge the sentiments of volunteers about an event would be to talk to them. A small pool, admittedly. Otherwise, we could run some kind of a survey for volunteers, but I think the point is, would they want to come out? And I guess you're right, there's two ways to do it. We either ask people like we've done, and we could try to ask more people, or we let the markets say, we just hold an event and see who shows up. It is, we're not in need of more things to do, so I guess it's hard to address a need that may not exist.
I just think it would be a nice thing to show appreciation to, if we had some kind of event to say, send those out to the Lions Club, send those out to any of the other volunteer organizations saying, we're gonna host this event and, please come out. So show our appreciation, that's all.
Councilor Wilson.
I think that the recommendation here for the person that we nominate as volunteer of the year is perfectly appropriate. And I would suggest that a simple way of solving the nitpicky problem around, is to kind of standardize it at one of our, with some very nice stores here, and Speeder being one of them, where you could get a volunteer every year the same thing, something simple like that. To Richard's point, which is a good one, there is, I think almost every year, there's been a big kind of wine and cheese party in recognition of volunteers more broadly in the community. I mean, I've been to several of them, and they're, I think, organized by the chamber and usually hosted. I know one of them was at the Bardens a few years ago, and they've been here and there all over town. That does exist, but it's maybe not quite so formal, and it's certainly not coming down. So I would like to make the motion that the deputy mayor was going to make to accept this recommendation.
Okay, and it is seconded. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
So we're not gonna even think about doing anything else for the rest of the volunteers. Just to represent a volunteer, right? That's what the recommendation is. So.
I don't know if the motion necessarily precludes that. I mean, this motion deals with, the card sort of recognition for a person, the one who gets the recognition from the province that we nominate. I don't see it as telling us we can't have a celebration where we invite.
Volunteer week comes along, unless let me see us, even for 1 year, just try, see how it goes, see if we get any significant turnout of people.
Just the volunteers or the volunteer and the spouse?
Volunteer and spouse, I guess. I don't,
Councillor Carter.
Many people here around the table will remember the volunteer event that Paul Seltzer hosted via the Mahone Bay Center quite a few years ago. And
Now we're having one for him.
of course, we had that, right? That's right. You need to have Paul's special magic, of course, but it was a fabulous event. It was a potluck.
Yeah.
And it was celebrating volunteers, and the gym at the center was jam-packed.
yeah.
Yeah, it was, and there was great, it was great. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
So I'm not against an event like that, but I don't think that should be council managed to put it on. I think volunteer groups, organizations in the community can take that on and put it up rather than us spending money and effort and time to do it. That's just the lesson.
How do we recognize the volunteer group that takes on the job of recognizing all?
Yeah,
this?
exactly. So, yeah,
Well, just
do
as
the recognition
as far
themselves.
as that goes, though, to the Deputy Mayor's point, town has advanced organizations program.
Yeah.
I'm sure that an application for funding to support an annual volunteer recognition event from any of the organizations that we've talked about here tonight would go over well with council.
Yeah.
So, hopefully if you're watching at home and you agree with Councillor now and you really want there to be an event, just send us a letter asking for money and we'll deal with that request.
You heard it here,
That's all the way to do.
Exactly. Fair enough.
And make it pop up and then it will be expensive.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah, what table collapsed at the potluck?
Oh, that was-
Oh, one of those potluck tables.
Ah,
that
The food on it.
So welcome.
A different,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the event. I remember.
yeah, a lot of good food was. Okay. Let's move on to the Marina Wharf condition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So further on this series of reports tonight, the town obviously are the owners of the marina facility, the former government wharf, as everybody likes to refer to it still. It was divested to the town more than 20 years ago by the federal government. As the owners, we are liable for the condition of that wharf, and when something comes to our attention, we do need to keep an eye on it and possibly take action. So there were some concerns raised last fall by the society that operates the marina at the wharf, and the town engaged an engineer for just a brief report to provide some direction to us. Is this something we need to take immediate action on? The recommendation at that, and the report is included as an appendix to this staff report. The recommendation at that time was to track the issue through the winter and then come summer when the boats have been removed from the wharf to consider more detailed investigation. We did track it. The results are presented there. It does show only minimal shift, but it does show a general shift, as do the pictures that are included on the report. So it remains the engineer's recommendation that we do some more testing. It may come back that there is a need to restrict activity on the wharf. It may come back with a recommendation that we make capital improvement. It may come back and say, actually, this is overstated and it's all great. It's unlikely. It's rarely what engineers tell you. But I think I have, the responsibility to bring to council a recommendation that we do proceed with, the actual recommendation doesn't say what it's for. So this would be the council approve the addition of $20,000 to the 2020, 22, 23 budget for detailed condition assessment of the wharf at the Mahone Bay Marina with corresponding transfer from gas tax reserve. So sorry, I left off pretty important what it's for, otherwise it just says transfer money. But that is my recommendation, and I'll take happily take any questions or suggestions.
Councillor Carver?
I'm in support of doing it, but I'm curious about the delay in it coming to council. If the report was available or written anyway in December 2021, so it's 7 months later.
Well, the recommendation of the report was that we monitor, and at the time, the report was just commissioned by staff out of operating funds for engineering, so we were not at that time bringing a recommendation to council for further steps, but I did need to bring it a few weeks ago, and it would have been nice to bring it before the budget, because it is a bit silly to be recommending an addition to the budget on the night when the budget is being approved. That being said, it's a reserve funded initiative, and you're all familiar with the balance of the gas tax reserve, so I don't think it comes at the expense of anything else in the budget. But yeah, so that was why we didn't bring it forward. It was a judgment call. We could have brought it forward sooner.
Okay. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
So I think one of the things that probably I haven't put my mind to sort of thinking about it critically is the narrative around a publicly funded facility like this. And sometimes there's stories that have come back to council around restricted usage through other means, not directly through an email or communication to council. And so I'm wondering, with our agreement with the folks who run that space, whether there's any features there that can allow sort of when they're putting up signs, they're putting up structures of how it can be used, that council has either an update to get a sense of what they're doing. I don't think it's necessarily approval, but just to get a sense that they're not overlooking some things that are, from my perspective, need some nuance around how we're communicating with the public about a publicly funded facility. So for a case whereby I think there's miscommunication around if you're using it for a canoe or a kayak, how much you need to pay, or whether you need to pay to actually just launch your kayak or do stuff like that. And how clear is that communication so that it's not left to an individual person in the community trying to navigate lots of different places to get an actual clear picture that yes, I can launch my vessel here without having to pay money to do that, because I've paid for it in some way, shape, or form.
So I think if I'm understanding correctly, you're just asking more about the nature of the arrangement that existed in town at the society.
Yeah.
So I can certainly send the license agreements around so that everybody can review them.
Yeah.
Some members of council are more familiar than others because they have come up over the years, but so I can do that, and then subsequent to that, if there's anything you want to raise on them, you could do that at another meeting.
Well, just one simple question around if they're putting up restrictions, caveats as to the use of the facility, are they just allowed to do that without council approval, or do they have to come to council or staff with that kind of stuff?
Well, it's a broad question. I mean, they are operating marina, and within the nature of the operation of the marina, there's plenty of jurisdiction, that they have, discretion that they have. The agreement says there are a few things that they have to specifically inform the town about or come to the town for approval of.
Yeah.
But, operating rules within the marina are broadly at their discretion. And, there's a lot of minutia there as well.
Yeah.
So something like, does the agreement say that they have the right to set their own fees? I imagine that is stipulated to in the agreement. We don't set their fees. They've always set their own fees. But does it say, fees can or can't be imposed for parking or use of the ramps, or, obviously the floating docks that they've installed? Those are kind of details that I think we find the agreement is relatively high level.
Yeah.
And if council's inclined to, you could look at next time around expanding on some of the wording in those areas to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
I don't know historically, the boat launch ramps were always available for public use back in the day. I don't know historically if that ever knowingly was presented to council as in order to operate a commercial marina, this is something that would have to be at the discretion of the marina to charge for. Because I wasn't involved when the marina was set up in the first place. But at this point, I do think that they have, a business model that they're operating with there, and they do make use of the facility. Things like associating the limited parking with having a mooring. I think generally they have over the years said, if you want to have a parking spot here, you would need to be a patron here. And there's signage that reflects that. And it's been commented on over the years. When did that happen? I don't know when it happened, but I know that it's part of the incentive that they're offering, because if you have a mooring and you can't park, that would obviously reduce the value of the mooring to people who had to park halfway across town and walk down to their boat. So, it is a complicated thing to pull one string out of an operation like that. But I'll circulate the documents, and I'm sure that the society folks are always happy to come and have a dialogue as well. Like they're very forthcoming.
Well, so I guess just to round that off, I think for me, the aspect of spending $20,000 to do an assessment on this piece of property, and then the citizens who live in town who pay taxes that these monies are going towards doing that cannot access from whatever the reason is, whether they're part of the marina or not. For me, that's a difficult, I guess, issue to get around. And I think we probably there needs to be a nuance around how that kind of stuff is done, so that we're not in a place whereby, in many ways, we're creating a space for a particular kind of folks.
No, don't go there. Please don't go there.
But don't interrupt me.
No.
I'm.
Yeah, go ahead. I apologize.
I'm making my argument.
Go ahead, make your
You have
argument.
your time to make yours.
Go for it.
It's similar to if we're investing, if we're investing money in soccer field, for example, and then we're putting restrictions as to how the community uses that soccer field. Those restrictions must allow, at least for those folks who contributed to making that possible, to be able to use that soccer field. That's the same argument I'm bringing to the table in this piece.
Mr. Mayor, can I?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to comment on that last point about it's like the soccer field, because I actually think it's even more like the soccer field than people might realize. You know, we have a pool, which you have to pay to use. We have a tennis club you have to be a member of to use. You know, it's likely that the soccer field, after being improved, will have usage fees associated with the, you know, the prime times, the spots that people want to use them. So I think it is actually fairly normal museum that we own. You know, the grants that we give to the museum for their property. So we don't own the museum, but we own the property. We're forgiving all of the costs associated with the property taxes and operation and utilities, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That is all done, and then they still charge for access. So, you know, I think those arrangements are quite widespread with the town. So that's, I just wanted to mention in terms of like, it isn't unusual to have a public asset with a fee for use.
Yeah, and it's not about just the fee for use that I'm I guess sticking on. I mean, if a fee is like $5 that everybody can afford, that's quite understandable. But restricting, for instance, like those are signs showing that you cannot access, you cannot even walk down that
Well,
road.
there were signs.
Can't fit.
They're not there now.
So that's, for me, that's a nuance that I think it's good for them to have leeway in terms of how they can operate things, but that leeway has to be with some limits. It can't be just blanket that they can do what they desire if it's publicly funded. Similar to what the police do, right?
Yeah, and again, we have agreements with them to specify that.
Councilor Green.
Just a couple of things, like I do think that we should ask for the Marina Society team to come to council so that we can have a conversation. Probably don't need a special meeting or an even official meeting, something in the format similar to the one that we had with the chamber up at the Mohone Bay Center, so we can have an open and frank conversation. I do think that there's some messages that need to be delivered to the society management team around the way their management style is being interpreted by community members. And which is, so errors have been made, whether it be the signage most recently or the recent, media posts about access. And there's an impression that it's not an open community space where everyone is welcome, but rather an asset to be used exclusively for the yachting community and their friends, as was recently illustrated in black and white on the sign on, so now it's no parking, no swimming, no fishing, but it's perfectly available for boat storage. So in, my life in the town, we've gone from lots of swimming and lots of fishing, but no boat storage, to no fishing, no swimming, but plenty of boat storage. So I know, as has been mentioned a few times, we've had a number of residents in the community who believe that they're negatively impacted by the boat storage as a going concern as part of the Marina Society. I know that they generate between $9,000 and $10,000 a year for boat storage, but I do believe that these issues are inextricably linked. Like, we're talking about engineering, negative impact, like load ratios and cribs moving. You can't help but think that, although I defer to iron rings all around the table, that there's got to be a correlation between, storing heavy boats on the end of precariously at the end of the government wharf for 9 months of the year, as we wait until as we wait until Victoria Day rolls around before the boats leave, and then they're promptly deposited back on the end of the wharf in October. So I think if we're going to spend $20,000 and approve that tonight, with the expectation that we could be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars next year, I can't see how we would ever go back to spending that kind of money and continuing to use that wharf as a boat storage facility. That those two things they don't make any sense to me to come together. So
I welcome the seeing the agreement again, as the CAO suggested. That would be very helpful as a starter. So that we can, now that we have these questions in our minds, we can read the agreement. And didn't we just renew that agreement fairly recently? We did.
It probably seems recently, but I think it's been 3 years. And 2.5 years.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to believe I've been here 4 years, but yeah, I think,
Oh my goodness. And so how often do we renew it?
I can pull it up. Oh, no, I can't. I have a new laptop.
So you can tell us.
Yeah, I think it's only a 5-year term, if I recall correctly. So I'll recirculate that.
Thank you.
And if I could just say, Mr. Mayor, in terms of like, I think there's 2 separate conversations going on. Obviously, council has an interest in the operation of the marina, and if we're spending public money to maintain a wharf, it would make sense to think about what that wharf is being used for. But you know, the fact of the matter here is, just because an engineering report may come back and say that money could be spent, it also could say, just close it down, right? Like, you don't have to spend the money. So council needs to know what the consequences of action or inaction here are to be able to make those decisions. So, you know, just finding out doesn't automatically make us responsible. Not doing anything and having an engineer saying there's a concern is a possible liability that I don't think we should allow to go unaddressed.
That's good asset management.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because I've previously been a CAO for a coastal community with a ton of these type of assets, to me, it's just, this is what happens. They're very expensive to have and maintain, and it's just part of doing business. So Mahone Bay is fortunate. We only have one small wharf asset, because, you know, and there's not a lot of assistance either, much like fire halls and fire stations. Wharves are an area that the feds divested themselves. And if you ask them for money, they'll say, well, just get rid of it, because they got rid of it.
Councilor Feeney?
Mayor, hearing that, I'd move that council approve the addition of $20,000 to the 2022-23 budget that will be funded through a transfer from the gas tax reserve.
And then we'll stick in that motion for detailed condition assessment of the wharf. I just forgot.
Fair enough.
Councilor Carver seconds it. On the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the water system audit follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had presented last November a detailed report on essentially a one-off water system audit that would become an annual water system audit process. And for that, we had the assistance of Xylem. There were a number of reports that were, a number of recommendations that were forthcoming from that report. Again, mostly they're about process, and I had emphasized previously that although we've had turnover with staff, this consultant has come back and had a few sessions with our current staff in order to make sure that they are also up on the process improvements. AWWA is a standardized organization developing best practices for water wastewater operations, and one of those best practices is the annual non-revenue water audit. And now we have a good handle on how to execute that. And between those annual audits, there is additional information that can be tracked. And there were a few recommendations specifically that would require financing. So this report was directed, we requested it, staff requested the council direct us to bring this forward, but it was just to show the linkage between the work that was done last fall and the annual budget and the work that is ongoing with staff. And as Councillor Wilson commented earlier, we're reporting on it every meeting. So there were 2 capital items that were included in the capital budget here, directly related. One was a new flow meter to provide additional data point to the operator in terms of tracking flows of treated water. And the other one was the auto flushers at 2 locations in the system. That basically was identified as a way to cut down on known non-revenue water system losses because we were bleeding lines at the extremities of the system, losing more water in that process than we needed to. The auto flushers can be calibrated to minimal loss of water. So those are a couple of capital recommendations, and there's a number of different operating recommendations that were noted there. So all that being said, the actual report here, the recommendation is the council accept this report for information, and we'll continue to work to track down leaks in the system utilizing this process. And we'll continue to report that, and presumably we'll continue to see some improvement. And when we don't see improvement in those quarterly statistics, then council can ask more about this. But as far as I'm concerned, this report essentially, brings everything back around to demonstrate that we've now made non-revenue water loss a priority in accordance with council's strategic plan. Happy to take any questions.
After all that, no one has any questions. Okay,
So the recommendation is the council accept this report for information.
yeah. Seconder? Councillor Carver, on the question, all in favor? Accepted for information. Let's go to the last item in 6.9, the temporary borrowing resolution. I think Councillor Carver, you had picked up a couple of discrepancies. Have they been adjusted?
I think they were in the template itself, if I'm, so one of them was on the description of the amount of money in it. Unfortunately, like this has been PDF'd off of a fillable PDF.
Yeah.
So it's actually just cutting off things that are in the blanks that are too small.
Okay.
So I think at least one of the changes was in the blank. It was another one also in the blank, Councillor Carver.
Oh, what was the other one? It was in the email I sent.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can't change anything in this thing. If you have a typo, tell me to school affairs.
It was the spelling of
change
the
the
word.
template.
Whereas,
We're at, but there was, there was something else in that.
and the text version of the amount.
Oh, yes, there is a typo. That's in the template, so we can't fix it. We'll tell municipal affairs. so we can-
Tell Right.
So it's essentially, we jumped right into the draft resolution, but what's being presented here is just we all know the fire station project is just about wrapped up. The grand opening coming up on the 20th of August. We've been ironing out the last few little deficiencies and things, but for all intents and purposes, the project is complete. So we need to proceed to long-term borrowing, which was always the intention for that project. And there will be an MFC debenture issue coming up at the end of September. That would be the next opportunity. Before that, we need a current temporary borrowing resolution approved by the minister. So since our last request dates back almost a year, our recommendation was to go ahead now, re-request temporary borrowing resolution on this project, and make sure that we get that off to municipal affairs now, so that we're all cleared before the September 30th deadline. But understanding, and Councilor Feeney's ready to bring this up, this is the TBR, so it authorizes us to borrow up to an amount of money for the project. So the TBR, years and years ago, when we first figured out this project, Luke basically said, this is the most it's going to be. That was what we were trying to figure out. So that takes into account project management costs, other associated costs with the project. And that was 4.45, $4,456,600. So that's the amount that we've used ever since. And in September, we'll come back with a final report saying this was the actual cost. If we've had any cash contributions like we have had from the Fire Society for the hall, those can be deducted from the cost. Ultimately, if council looks at prospective interest rates for the debenture and says, let's maybe not go in for as much, that's also a discussion that can be had. But ultimately, council will approve an amount of money to debenture in September. And as long as it's less than $4.45 million, then we have the minister's authorization. So that's the relationship between that number, which admittedly hasn't changed in 3 years, and the actual project costs, which just have to be less than the amount of the resolution. So all that means that the recommendation is the resolution itself, which is why it's not highlighted, because it's the entire page. And as we have done in the past, I would recommend that we don't have to go through the whole thing. But if somebody says, pass the motion as described in the appendix, then
Excellent. Happy to make
I'm just kidding.
That's Shelley going to read the whole thing. No, this is progress. Mayor, I'd move that we pass the temporary borrowing resolution as submitted. Or presented.
Thank you.
In the
Seconded
amount-
by the deputy mayor.
Well,
On
this-
the question,
Just to note the amount, Mayor, $4,456,000 for the purposes of the fire station.
you say,
And don't forget the 600.
and the 600 on the left. And if you say it quickly, it doesn't hurt as much.
Exactly.
Okay, on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. And now we can get that going. Okay, that is it for staff reports. Let's go to council items 7.1, the 2022-23 Mahone Bay budget. It has been a rather lengthy process. Many days and many evenings. And lots of stuff to read in anticipation of those meetings. But I think, council, we have arrived at a budget that is reasonable. I think it's responsible. And I think there's enough flexibility in it that if it needs some fine tuning or some adjustment, we can make that happen as well. You have a number of motions for the budget. If someone would like to take on the first one.
And I'll just make one quick note, because we did have a correction on the motions presented here by email from Ashley with respect to the third one down, which speaks to the electrical utility operating budget expenditures in the amount of, and there's a slight correction there as a result of information received from area on important power prices. So that was emailed out. But other than that, there's a big list.
I
of-
think there was
Another one with regard to fire tanks, the
So-
fire department budget.
Oh, yes, that was in here. Sorry, I thought that was in the press.
That's
release. That
all
was in
there.
here as well, yes.
So is
So
that,
we have two changes in an amended version, and I think Ashley put them both in the second one, so we should have.
She said that was the amended ones.
Yeah, I think the second one did include the first one. So we can bring up her most, if
that's in
everybody,
her email.
you have access to. This would have been the one that went out at.
Council Wilson?
16.
Move that the council approve the 2022-23 general operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $2,809,194 as presented. The general tax rates are set at $1.11.5 per $100 and $3.055 per $100 for commercial, with fire rates set at 1.167 per $100 and an infrastructure charge of $300 per unit.
Thank you.
The fire tax shouldn't be in that one because it's been changed to another one.
So, yeah, that, we don't have a second, but that was part of the issue, was that Counselor Now had requested, and I think rightly, that there was a need for revision. So at 4:16 today, Ashley sent out the most up-to-date version of the motions. So I don't know if you have that, Counselor Wilson, but it's the same thing minus the reference
Minus
to the
the
fire.
I'll take out the fire.
Take out the fire tax rate, set it.
I'll second that, Mayor.
7. Okay,
And I guess just since it is a significant motion, for clarity with the secondary, and if we've amended, I'll just read, just as Mo would do normally, and I won't make Kelly do it.
you got it?
So the motion on the floor is the council approve the 2022-23 general operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $2,809,194 as presented. General rate set at $1.11.5 per $100 of residential and $3.05 per $100 of commercial at the $300 per unit.
Just said that.
That's it.
More or less. Okay, that's been moved, that's been seconded. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the next item.
I would move that,
Before we have a
Yeah.
question, right? The numbers, the overall number has changed. The overall number has not changed. but there's been changes in the individual budget numbers, and so that's throwing me off a little.
So the overall number never included fire. So the issue that was caught was that in the original paragraph, the way it was written, it referenced the total amount of expenditures, 2,809,194. That would have been exclusive of the 215,589 for fire. So that was simply not stated. It wasn't included, so we didn't back it out. It was just simply missing. It's not absolutely essential that that number be included because the fire rate number is the thing that the motion has to set. But this is a much better, more complete picture because it substantiates that the fire rate is to pay for $215,589 of fire-related expenditures. If that makes sense.
It does on one part.
And the electrical is not included in general operating, so that change is just to change the electrical line. Yeah, because the general operating number doesn't include utilities.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Councilor Phoenix.
Mayor, move that council approve the 2022-2023 fire department operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $215,589 as presented, and set fire tax rate at 0.167 per $100.
Okay, seconded by the deputy mayor. On the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Next,
I'll go.
please.
The council approved the 2022-23 capital budget with expenditures totaling $14,270,556, supported by a projected $5,781,199 in external funding. Noting projects dependent on external funding will not move ahead until funding has been secured.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now? On the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor Now, you want to give us the next one?
Just one more. That wasn't on the right one. The other ones, okay.
This is electric utility.
The council approved the 2022-23 electric utility operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $2,412,562 as presented.
Councillor Carver seconding. Okay. I assume that the numbers are continuing to be slightly different on the
This is the corrected number.
Yeah.
This is the final.
the 2,400,000 is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I got 2,537,000,
It's the latest figure she's had.
so this is the.
And that represent, just for anybody listening, that represented a correction in the estimated power purchase cost for the year based on updated information received from area who manage our power purchases.
Okay. On the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Deputy Mayor, the next one?
Yeah, I'd like to move the council approve the 2022-2023 electric utility capital budget with expenditures totaling $217,553.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Now? On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go next, Councillor Wilson.
Water, the council approved the 2022-23 water utility operating budget with expenditures in the amount of $697,046 as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Feeney, seconds. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd approve. I'd move, the council approve the 2022-2023 water utility capital budget with expenditures totaling $5.493563, supported by projected $3,681,766 in external funding. Oak Springs Eternal.
Deputy Mayor, seconds? All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to Councillor Carver.
I move that, council approve the 2022-23 cemetery budgets in the amount of $17,200 for Park Cemetery and $31,000 for Bayview Cemetery as presented.
You. Councillor Now, seconds on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. And the last one.
I
Councillor
will
Now,
move that council approve the budget press release as presented.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds and the question.
So it's presented with the amendments that have been suggested by members of council.
Yeah, because the document's not included in the package.
Yeah.
Presented will be the most recently updated version of the document. And so-
We're trusting you.
So the intention would not, for anybody listening, the intention for not providing the press release in the package is that it is typically released on approval of the budget. And so with these motions, we will send out the press release tomorrow morning. And then when it's attached on the website, it will be included in the budget document.
Okay,
Could you include something in that press release that everybody on our council had COVID? The mayor was a little upset about some coverage in the adjacent communities.
Yeah, we survived too.
in the discussion before the council meeting began, we noted in the newspaper that one of the illustrious mayors in Lunenburg County was cited as having back on the job, having recovered from COVID. And I said, gee, we had 4 people away from the council table because of COVID and doesn't make the newspaper. I don't know.
So there'll be our person.
That's it. Okay, anything else on the budget,
That was not voted on.
the draft budget itself?
Yeah, we were still in discussion on motion.
Okay,
On the press
There was
release.
no press release, we have not voted on that.
all in favor on the press release? Motion's carried. Let's go back to our agenda page
Speaking of COVID,
and the budget itself.
gallery.
It's what?
I said, speaking of COVID, we're going to talk about the gallery.
We are indeed.
Hmm.
So let's look at our draft budget.
Well, that's just their attendant to the motions button.
So it's included in the meeting package in case one of our citizens may choose to go to the town's website and have a look at the package from tonight's meeting, and they'll be able to see the budget in detail.
Yeah, and we'll put a final version up, but should somebody have been looking, thinking I'm going to come join and possibly type questions in on YouTube,
Okay.
they could follow along with the draft version.
All right. So are we finished with the budget? Let's go to 7.2. Council Chambers Gallery. Now, I struggle with this one because COVID is once again raising its ugly head. The staff over at the landfill site are having a major issue with COVID within their numbers. However, it's been a long time since our council chamber was open to the public. It's been a long time since we have been able to discuss openly with citizens in the council chamber. We do have them on YouTube. We actually get more people watching the council meetings on YouTube than we ever have here in the council chamber, unless we had a big issue going on, right? And then it was standing room only. What I would ask of council is that we consider that when we return after the late summer break, when we come back for our first meeting in September, that we invite the gallery back to our meeting. It may mean that we all wear masks, depending on what's going on with COVID. And I would suggest that we probably won't be able to accommodate the throngs of people that will no doubt want to come to a council meeting, but at least the opportunity will be there for them. I'd appreciate any of your comments, feedback, thoughts on the issue.
It's about time. Yeah, it's time to do it.
Councillor Carver?
I'm not keen on the idea of meeting with masks because the sound in the room is hard enough anyway. But if we have to do that, then we have to do that.
Well, and I guess just to point out, at the current time, it remains discretionary.
Yeah.
So some members around the table may, and that may make it hard for you to hear, because it's really
Yeah.
not necessarily you wearing the mask that would be the problem in that case. But yeah, I think it remains discretionary unless the province takes a drastic turn in the direction
Yeah,
of imposing
and
restrictions.
then it's beyond our control, as it was the last time. Deputy, what are your thoughts?
I'm okay with it.
Okay,
I'm just gonna note just total coincidence, but September 13th, I won't be here in person because I'm going to be attending a conference. If I join, I'll be joining remotely. So anyways, in the gallery, I'll see you from Prince Edward Island if you're in the gallery.
Okay,
Or maybe Maureen will be, I may not be in attendance.
so do we need a motion, CAO, do you think, or to
Uh,
direct staff to make?
I don't think so, but you can if you want to. I don't think there's any harm in it.
Mayor,
Well, it's your council meeting, so I think we should.
Mayor, I think you should just mention this in your newsletter to let folks know that the chambers are open
Yeah,
for business.
we can do that. So beginning with the council meeting in, the first meeting in September, the plan right now, unless something happens, is that the gallery will be open.
And it'll go out on social media too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So do we need a motion for that?
Bring in the,
Do we
Uh,
want a motion for
I don't think you need it.
You don't need it, but you might want it. It's really just a.
oh, make the motion.
that? I'll
There
make
you
a
go.
motion that we open, there's up to galleries in September.
Do we have a seconder? Counselor Carver, all in favor? Thank you. Okay. It's 7:2 and 7:3, appointment of the CAO Review Committee. This is something that we now have a policy on that we never had before. The review committee will consist of the mayor and the deputy mayor and a councillor. Now, the last time I was here as the mayor, and Councillor Deputy Mayor Noss was in the chair and he participated. And the representative from council was Councillor Carver. Obviously, this time it'll be myself and the deputy mayor. And
Councilor.
pardon me?
Thank you.
No, well, I thought it might be an opportunity to develop some expertise around it. By getting someone else other than, we haven't got any choice with me. Right, we do have the deputy mayor who's a different perspective. And I had approached Councillor Wilson to see if he would be interested to participate, given his industrial, his business experience, and working in that type of activity. So,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
okay, and Councillor, now, Councillor Carver.
With all due respect, the policy speaks clearly to the appointment of the third member.
Yes. Okay, so,
In the committee terms of reference, the committee terms of reference says the third member
mhm,
shall be a previous deputy mayor, which we don't have on the council. Or it will be the councillor who has received the next highest number of votes after the deputy mayor,
Is-
or the person who has served longest on council.
is that for the person who would be deputy fill in behind the mayor or on the performance
Well,
review
I
committee?
may have read the policy wrong, but perhaps
I-
I see the CAO searching.
I think the
It
performance.
says
review-
the most recent deputy mayor, or the most recent deputy mayor is not a member of council, council shall appoint another member of council by motion. So I think the thing about votes was in how the deputy mayor was selected,
Hmm.
but I don't think it's in this.
Oh,
It just
really?
says by motion, so, I would say we didn't talk about the fact we don't have a former deputy mayor, but essentially the mayor is correct in saying the process is for council to appoint by motion. Now, whether that's ask anyone to put up their hands or ask anyone if they want to nominate someone or for the mayor as he said, has suggested someone.
Well,
But I think ultimately it's just a motion. Council's hands are not tied in which member of council would be appointed by motion.
my thought as we approach this was that it would give us a different perspective in terms of broadening the experience of members of council in this kind of an activity. Deputy Mayor?
So this is a yearly review, right?
Yes, yeah, this
Yeah.
would be reappointed annually.
It's 2 years, I think, isn't it, CAO, since we did it? It was at the very
Yeah, well,
tail
yes,
end of the
yeah.
last council.
It has been 2 years since we did it, but the intention going forward would be that this would be a reappointed annually.
Yes.
Position, yeah.
I would be open to councillor Carver filling in for me, if that's allowable, so that he can.
It's
be
not
councillor
allowed.
Carver. It's not allowable.
You're stuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a matter of how we do a motion, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Well, that's
How did
right.
I get to that?
I'm not sure, Councillor
It's
Carver.
5.1 in the policy is the part where it talks about the committee appointment.
Yeah,
I think the thing you were thinking of with the votes was just in the policy around how the deputy mayor is selected.
The CAO review committee will consist of the mayor, deputy mayor, and the most recent deputy mayor. Where the most recent deputy mayor is not a member of council, council shall appoint another member of council by motion. You are absolutely right. I did somehow conflate another.
Hmm. So, I guess, how do we get to the motion?
Well, I
Honestly,
guess-
I'm volunteering, I'm not allowed to.
Given that, I will certainly respect the mayor's choice.
Mayor, I'd move that the CAO review committee invite Councilor Wilson to join the de facto members,
Just say, move that council appoints.
appoints
Councilor Wilson.
Councilor Wilson to the committee.
We have seconded by Councillor Now on the question.
Yes.
And this is a CEO.
This is your question.
Performance review committee, right?
Yes.
So it's not CAO review committee, so.
It is actually called the CAO review committee and yeah, I guess it's brevity, but yeah, it's the committee that is responsible for the CAO's performance review under the CAO performance review policy.
Don't worry, Dylan, I'll write to you. I'll write you a letter of recommendation.
Yeah, you're independent, you're not on the committee.
I'm gonna have another special meeting and talk about this. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Councillor Carver. Okay, let's go to committee reports, Climate and Environment Committee. The draft minutes. Anyone have any questions? Who's on that committee that's here tonight, Councillor Carver? Okay, no questions?
Very dynamic committee.
There's no recommendation, there's nothing in there.
No, I'm just thinking of our environmental. No. Then let's have, what about the Audit and Finance Committee from July 22nd?
Mayor, stemming from business from the committee, I'd move that council direct staff to write a letter to Mr. Darrell Haley, thanking him for his service on the committee.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, and under new business, Councillor Carver, you have notice of motion.
Yeah, I would like to bring a motion to the September 13th meeting about the subject that got bumped from last week's Policy and Strategy Committee up to the September meeting at the end of September. And that was the review of the committee policy and possibly also the council policy if we had time. And recognizing that there is a very tight time frame before the end of the year. It occurred to me that it would help to have some recommendations brought to that committee, particularly about the scoring and selection of members for the committee. And wondered, so I'm going to bring a motion to that September 13th meeting of council to the effect that we appoint an ad hoc committee that will prepare some recommendations to come to the Policy and Strategy Committee, just as a way of saving time. So we don't have to do it all in the short time at the end of September, because there's going to be a fair amount of text I think to go through for the committee.
Who do you see as populating that ad hoc committee? Members of
Oh, I
council?
thought, a staff member and 2 councillors. Anyway, that's my note,
Okay,
that's my notice.
Yep.
We can discuss it when we get.
so the motion will be to establish the ad hoc committee for the
Yeah,
purpose
very,
of,
very short term, very
Yep.
short term and focused.
okay?
And not to be provocative, but I guess it is in order if somebody on seeing Modal's motion on transit issue from the beginning of this meeting, way back when, wanted to give a notice of motion in support of that initiative, that is in order. And I'm not trying to say that anyone has to, but
Mhm.
It's a good point, I'll do that.
Okay. Well, Councillor Wilson's going to do a notice of motion on the transit proposal.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
no so much.
All right,
just to provide something indicative.
yeah,
to the
that's all we need, and I presume Councillor Carter that you'll be talking with staff about any material that you would be providing in anticipation of that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. How many folks do we have watching at home?
We have 8 watching from home and 2 questions.
Yeah,
What are you going to do about the smoke pollution from Betty's outdoor wood burning chimney?
It's just that in the stats.
Well, I mean, I think the answer is we're going to investigate it,
Mhm.
and if there are any violations of any town bylaws, they'll be dealt with accordingly.
okay,
And why should we have to keep our windows closed from 7:30 till 10:30 because of the wood smoke from Betty's? Related second question.
good question. And I think what we talked about tonight was that staff will check in or investigate and see if there is any regulation, legislation, bylaw, provincial fire regulation, or construction regarding the height of chimneys and.
And I guess the last, recourse here, and not to give anyone legal advice, but, obviously bylaw enforcement has a role. But disputes between neighboring properties is also covered under the section of law, and they may wish to seek legal advice in that regard.
As a neighbor of the,
Yeah, independently of what bylaws
Yeah.
can offer them.
yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right. We'll thank the people at home who joined us on YouTube tonight. And remind them that there are 6 councillors and myself and a town hall full of eager staff. If you have a question or you have an issue, don't hesitate to bring it forward. Council will be on vacation for the most part during the month of August,
Just waiting for a call from area.
among other things. Okay,
Motion to move to closed session, Mayor?
okay. We have second or all in favor? We are now in camera.
Based on litigation.
Yeah, potential litigation was the one. Thank you to the people again at home. Will you let us know when we're clear, please?